Earlier this year, we entered a new era of chess as Ding Liren was crowned the World Chess Champion. Now, there were quite a few champions who came before him. Chess history is rich of great players. So today, let's take a look and go through a journey back in time to see who the former world champions were. Stick around as we delve into the first 5 world champions in history. Now, to start off, we are only looking at the first 5 because there are quite a few and there is so much to say about all of them that we are going to be sitting here all day. So let's take a look at who we are talking about today. So first up, we have Wilhelm Steinitz, the first world champion from 1886 to 1894, followed by Emanuel Lasker from 1894 to 1921. That's a really long time. We'll get into that later. Third, we've got Capablanca from 1921 to 1927, followed by Alekhine, and you'll see we've got 2 dates here because Alekhine briefly lost his title but then got it back, and he lost his title to the 5th champion, Max Euwe. Now let's get into it. Wilhelm Steinitz, the first world champion. Now, when he entered the scene, chess was already booming. We had players like Adolf Anderssen and Paul Morphy who dominated chess at the time, and it was all fireworks and kingside attacks, checkmates. It was quite crazy. Now, Steinitz introduced a new style where instead of just kingside crazy attacks, Steinitz directed play towards the queen side and the center, so more of a full round approach. He developed a theory that players should collect small strategic advantages to prepare a winning attack. Overall, we can consider Steinitz's style to be more technical, scientific, and strategic, which with along paired with a strong work ethic, introduced this new style of chess where he dominated. Steinitz actually took a break from chess, playing international tournaments, probably not stopping playing completely because we all know once the chess bug bites you, it's got you forever. And during this time, he was writing analysis, engaging in top-level play and tournaments, just not playing himself. And during this time, Johannes Zukertort was dominating tournaments. So, in 1882, when Steinitz returned to world-class chess, he got a bunch of financial backers and an eagerness to see who was actually the top player at the time, and therefore the first World Chess Championship was held in the US between Wilhelm Steinitz and Johannes Zukertort. With his superior understanding of openings, creativity, and strategic play, Steinitz won the match. It was decided by who gets to first 10 wins, and he became the first world chess champion. Steinitz defended his title 3 more times against the Russian player Mikhail Chigorin and the Hungarian Isidor Gunsberg, until he was dethroned in 1894 by Lasker. Let's take a look at one of Steinitz's really cool games against Chigorin in their 1982 World Championship match. We'll be looking at a few games from these world champions just to show their finesse, and we'll be working through the book Modern Chess from Steinitz to the 21st Century by Craig Pritchett. Now, this is a really cool book. I have basically read through all of it. It's just helps you understand chess history in such an engaging way because it's not just about the world champions but the top players at the time. Anyway, let's get into it. Now, first of all, if the name Chigorin sounds familiar to you, it's probably because you've heard of the Chigorin defense opening, and that is d4, d5, c4, and black plays knight c6. We'll have a completely different video on that, but this was named after Chigorin. Anyway, let's get back to the game between Steinitz and Chigorin in the World Championship match in Havana 1892. Steinitz is playing as white and Chigorin is playing as black. We start off with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, a young Spanish, knight f6, d3, d6, c3, g6, knight bd2. Now, in the book, you'll find analysis of every game, but we are just going to briefly go through it just to show you how the game goes. Bishop g7, knight f3. As we can see, Steinitz's maneuvering is already pretty prevalent, and this has become quite a common idea in this opening today. Castle, bishop a4. White, of course, does not want to give up that bishop, so it comes back just to hide away on c2 if it is attacked. Black plays knight d7, knight e3, knight c5, bishop comes back to hide away, knight e6, and now Steinitz starts going for the kill with h4. Probably still in line with the attacking chess of that time, but as we see, it wasn't just chaotic. White first developed and got a good position before starting off. Black responded knight e7, and that pawn just kept going. d5, takes, and white simplifies in the center. Now this light squared bishop has a really great diagonal on the black king. So black comes back, queen c6, queen e2, bishop d7, bishop e3, completing development, king h8 to get off of the bishop's lethal diagonal, but stepping onto the rook's lethal open file, semi-open file. White castles queenside, rook a8, and queen f1. We will see this idea, but in the book the move is given an exclamation mark because it's considered one of the best moves in the game. White is able to create threats in the center and on the king side. The queen is coming over to the king side and at the same time stepping off of the e file. Now black tries to start something with a5, try to start some kind of queenside attack, but d4 has come. Takes, and white comes up with another bang, and that is understanding that the bishop pair is a lot stronger in this position. White understands to give up the exchange. Knight takes, and now maybe take a moment to pause and try to see what you would do as white, how you would finish it off. Now if you're ready, let's take a look, and the move is rook takes h7, opening up that file, and black is pretty much done for. The king has no more protection. So black takes, queen h1, the queen finally comes over to the h file, king g7, bishop h6. These two bishops and the queen are just enough to end the game. Queen h4, king e5, we take on d4, and it will be checkmate in the next move. What a great game. Everything was quite well played out strategically in the beginning, you know, following opening rules, developing, and then bam, out of nowhere this insane attack came, and this was played in a world championship match, which is honestly quite crazy to me, but we're gonna see a lot more crazier things. Right, next up, let's take a look at Lasker. Now, Emanuel Lasker, the second world champion from 1894 to 1921, was only 25 years old when he first won his title against Steinitz, who was a lot older at the time. Now, whereas Steinitz had some set rules, Lasker was a little bit freer in approach. He understood that, you know, we're humans and humans make mistakes. They're not always capable of finding the perfect move in any position. Instead, Lasker saw chess as a battle between two minds, both of which are capable of making mistakes. Now, Lasker is considered to be one of the best players of all time, largely due to his incredibly long-standing reign as world champion. If you did the math, you would see that Lasker was champion for 27 years. 27 years being world champion is just crazy. Of course, there were a lot of factors, including the First World War, but nevertheless, Lasker still holds this title. We will take a look at a game between Lasker and Steinitz from their 1894 World Championship match. So here we have Lasker playing as white and Steinitz playing as black. Steinitz, the current world champion at this time, playing and being much older than Lasker. This was quite an exciting match to see if the new blood in chess would overtake the older blood, which is exactly what happened. So d4, d5, c4. Again, we're just going to run through these games to showcase just how brilliant these world champions were. We've got a Queen's Gambit on the board, castle, bishop d3, and c5. The c5 idea is quite common. It's considered what's called semi-Tarrasch lines, and I guess in a few openings it comes up. Anyway, we've got d takes c5, d takes c4. Lot of trades, and the queens come off super early in the game. Move 8 already. White captures with the king, which means he can't castle anymore, but that doesn't really take anything away from how the game's going to play out. There aren't as many fireworks in this game, but you'll see Lasker's finesse anyway. Knight c6, a3, a defensive move, preparing to play b4 and gain a tempo when black... Here we go. Preparing to play b4 if black captures the c5 pawn, which gives white a tempo, and this light squared bishop can develop to b2. Another common idea we see today. So that's exactly what happened. Bishop takes c5, b4. This bishop has to move once again. Our king comes to e2 because at this stage of the game, when your queens are traded off, you don't really have to hide your king in the corner anymore. But you also don't want your king to be on the only open file on the board. So king e2, bishop d7, bishop b3, just making sure that all of our pieces are safe. This bishop was quite vulnerable on the c file, as it looks like black is prepared to bring a rook there, and then white would have two bad pieces, but coming to bishop b3 is a little bit of a prophylactic move. So rook c8, bishop b2 developing, defending that knight, so there aren't any tactics where black is able to open up the rook and capture this knight. So here black makes somewhat of a mistake. a5. Now, of course, if white traded pawns, this would be a great position. But this a5 move allows white to gain space on the queen side with b5. Now, this is a lot stronger than capturing, and we'll see that white suddenly, the game changes, and white suddenly gets a better position. Knight e7, knight e5, taking advantage of this space. Bishop e8, black doesn't want to give up the bishop pair. a4, a nice pawn chain, everything is quite comfortable for white. Bishop c7, knight c4. Bishop d7, and we bring out our rooks. Knight d5, offering a trade, which white accepts. Knight takes, knight e5. Now, black has to make a decision. Do they want to give up the bishop pair or keep it? But this knight is a little bit too strong, and white's bishops are very strong, but black's bishops aren't doing much. So at this point, black has nothing much better to do than to actually trade this knight off before it becomes super strong, by the way, with coming to d3. I mean, it's got a lot of possibilities, maybe going to c5 or just going to the king side. This knight has a lot of potential. So black captures, white captures. White has the bishop here right now. f6, chasing this bishop away, but now e6 becomes a little bit of a problem. e4, Okay, so this kind of goes with Steinitz's approach, where sometimes you attack through defense. That was one of his ways of thinking. And that's exactly what White has done. Instead of bringing the bishop back, White counterattacks by attacking the black knight. Again, putting black in a position to decide what to do. And black captures the bishop, which allows White to capture the knight, and this light squared bishop is the white light squared bishop is a lot stronger than the black one. Let's move on. King comes out to the defense, but at this point, if we see the difference between our king and black's king and just the placement of the pieces, White has a much superior position. Bringing up the other rook, king comes to e7, try to get off that diagonal, but also defending the pieces at the same time. But this allows d6, a nice little move that gives White the pass pawn. King goes to f6, and now the game just starts to crumble at black's feet. Black exchanges, but White doesn't mind, again because White has a superior bishop. Bishop c2, king f7, and the game is very close to ending. King e4, black doesn't have time to go for that bishop because the white king and d6 pass pawn is just too much to handle. King f6, g4, g5, king f3, and suddenly White gets another pass pawn, and this is just too much. Black resigned, and this is one of the games that saw Lasker becoming the new world champion. Now, before we get into Capablanca, who he was and how he rose to becoming the world chess champion, let's take a look at one of his checkmates. There is a famous kind of checkmate named after him, the Capablanca mate. Don't go look at it just yet. First, try to solve this checkmate in 4 moves that is based on one of his games and on his checkmates. We'll take a look at the solution at the end. Now, Capablanca is known for many things, but arguably the most important is for his positional understanding and endgame play. Players like Magnus Carlsen today are thought to be very much closely related in terms of their approach to chess with Capablanca. And just like Magnus, Capablanca had a very intuitive style of chess. It's as if he just understood chess naturally. He just found his own way to play, not exactly abiding by any rules. It was just supernatural. And he was even called the human chess machine because of his accurate speed. He would probably be just crazy in bullet today, but I suppose we would never know. It was, funnily enough, his predecessor, Emanuel Lasker, who spotted him at the Manhattan Chess Club in 1905. And a few years later, after the war, which halted the World Championship cycle, Capablanca continued with his successes by winning multiple tournaments, and eventually in 1921 a match was set up between Capablanca and Lasker. Capablanca triumphed as champion when Lasker resigned from the match after 14 games, which it was supposed to be 24 games, but after 14, Lasker said he had enough. It was clear who the new world champion was. Capablanca was also a notable chess author, contributing a lot to chess. We actually have one of his books, Chess Fundamentals, a timeless work of art that covers strategic fundamental principles that every chess player should know. You can get it for free on Forward Chess. Let's take a look at one of Capablanca's games against Lasker in the 1921 World Championship match. Here we have Capablanca as white and Lasker as black. Another Queen's Gambit. This time we have a Queen's Gambit decline. Knight f6, Bishop g5. Let us run through the opening to get to how the game works. Queen c2, c6, bishop d3. It's always interesting to see older games and how theory has developed over the years. D takes c4. This is, by the way, a common idea in Queen's Gambit, where black waits for white to develop the bishop and then captures on c4, because now the bishop has to move again, and technically white loses a tempo, but it's not such a huge deal, just a good thing to know. Knight d5, a lot of trades happening, castles, knight f8, Lasker starts remaneuvering, and now we see white starting to push in the center. Knight b6, white doesn't want to trade that bishop, so it comes right back to f1, and it's going to stay there the whole game until it's needed in the end. Just wait and see. Rook c8, b4, white starts creating some things and also just controls the c5 square, because now black is not able to push c5. Bishop e8, queen b3, rook c7, black is putting on some more power on the c file, a4, knight g6, a5, the pawns are just storming. Now you can see that Capablanca has a lot of control on the board in this position. Black seems a little bit cramped for space, and this is the exact reason why, instead of making trades which opens up the position, like for example a move like d5, white instead keeps that control by playing e5. At the same time, white has created a nice little outpost square on d6, which we will see being used later. After e5, of course, black also can't play f6, which is a common way to play against this kind of advanced pawn. You want to just get rid of it. In this case, not possible because the e6 pawn is weak. So black tries to make some exchanges on the queen side. b6, white ignores that. 94, it's going to the beautiful d6 square. Rook b8, getting out of there, just stepping off of the b file, so there are no little tactics of black capturing on a5. Knight f4, knight d6, a beautiful outpost square. Black also gets one, but if we look at the difference between our outpost knight and black's outpost knight, yes, black's attacking our queen, but after moving the queen out, what is this knight really doing? White's knight instead is taking a lot of space, cramping black's rooks, black's pieces. The rooks can't really move anywhere, whereas black's knight is kind of just chilling there. This is considered to be somewhat of a superfluous piece. It looks pretty, but it's not doing much. f6, black is finally able to gain some kind of tension on this pawn, and now white decides the time is right to make some exchanges. Knight takes e8, queen takes e8, takes, and what white saw is that these pawns, although they are together, they are actually going to become weak, and that is what white aims to do. b5, forcing black to make some choices. Of course, black denies it. Rook c8, takes, lots of trades happening, and now black's pawns are just terrible. This b6 pawn is an isolated pawn. This e6 pawn, the e6 and f6 pawns are called hanging pawns. Although they have each other, they're kind of just hanging around on the board with no defense, with no pawn defense. So rook e1, starting to put pressure on that pawn. The knight comes into play, and you can just understand Capablanca's in-game finesse in this position. Queen b3, just everything is under pressure. Basically, black has no real chance. This rook is just going up and down, unsure of what it wants to do. Bishop c4, building more pressure. Remember, the bishop came to f1 and just chilled there for the whole game. Now finally it comes back. Rook a5, knight c3, capturing, but as we can see, the light squared bishop is a lot stronger than this knight on f8. Queen e3, queen d6, queen e4, rook a4. Again, there's a lot of really great analysis in this book. Check it out. Now white's queen makes it to the other half of the board. King g6, queen c8. This e-pawn is just in a lot of trouble. Rook c1. Black's trying to make some threats, but everything is well defended. Queen e7, bishop d3, and rook comes to c7. It's pretty much over now. Checks aren't really going anywhere. Queen d6 and queen f8. Now black, of course, can't capture the queen because, let's choose narrow, because checkmate on h7 is coming next. So there's no way to save this position. As you can see, there was no huge blunder that Lasker made. Capablanca just pretty much outplayed him and understood the position a lot better. So, hope you solved that puzzle. We'll take a look at the solution at the end. Next up, we've got Alexander Alekhine. Now, Alekhine has one of the biggest claims to fame as a world champion, in that he was the only world champion to die still being a world champion. So a lot of chaos ensued after his death. We'll get on to that in the next video, but he held the title until his last days. Born into a wealthy family, Alekhine had a lot of opportunities to play chess competitively on an international level, and he quickly became one of the best players. Although his life was pretty insane, it was not just sunshine and roses. He spent some time in a German prison. He spent time, he was hospitalized. He went through a lot. But in 1921, he won the first Soviet chess championship. Now, you're going to hear a lot about the Soviet championship as we speak about all the world champions. And it's important to note that Soviet chess was pretty dominant for a very long time, and so winning it just automatically put you at the top spots pretty much in the world for a very long time. So Alekhine won the very first edition in 1921. Let's talk about his style. We're going to see a game later, but Alekhine's style was attacking and imaginative. He had this huge determination to be the best, and because of this, he was able to successfully beat Capablanca in 1927. His style was completely opposite to Capablanca's intuitive styles, but Alekhine, along with hard work, study, and theoretical research, was able to dethrone Capablanca. He wrote a lot of chess books. There's a lot of theory, as with most of these great players. Alekhine first successfully defended his title twice, but in a huge shock to the chess world, he lost to the much weaker Max Euwe in 1935, losing his world championship title. But this didn't stop him. He came back 2 years later and regained the title. Let's take a look at one of Alekhine's games from a simul, and this is from the book Alekhine Move by Move by Steve Giddens. It's a really cool book that shows Alekhine's tactical nature, and you're able to learn his games and play along with them. Let's take a look at this simul game. So in this game, we've got Alekhine playing as whites in a simul. As mentioned, d4. White goes with d4, black responds with d5, knight f3. Again, when you're playing a simul, it means, you're playing against a lot of people at the same time. So it's going to be a lot of chess, a lot of pressure, I think, for any player who plays a simul. c4, black plays e6. Knight c3, captures e3, opening up that bishop. Knight f6, capturing, bishop b4. It's a lot of normal moves in the beginning, which I think if you're playing a world champion, you would be very happy about. But you'll see, out of nowhere, the fireworks start. Black castles, queen c2, bishop a3, just, yeah. This white is just taking advantage of the position, the bishop pair, and just immediately gaining some kind of positional advantage. c6, white starts pushing in the center. e4, h6, a little bit of a dubious move, I guess. Black doesn't want to make any commitments just yet. Just defending g5. We'll see what happens next. Bishop d7. Now, unlike the other games, this isn't a world champion playing against a world champion, but I wanted to include this game just to show you how aggressive Alekhine's style was. f4, the party has already started. Queen c7, f5, just going. Black is kind of developing pieces, but at this point it's too late. Bam, knight takes f7, bringing that king out, and e5, another bang. Of course, the e6 pawn is pinned. White has a lot of time to do what they want. This king's pretty much in the center. Knight g8, bishop d6. I mean, just this is, this is a crazy game. Black tries to do something on the queen side, but unfortunately there isn't enough time. Queen h5. Should have put this as a puzzle, but this is just, giving up the queen because it's going to be checkmate soon. This king has nowhere to run to. King comes out, check. Now all the checks just start, check, check, check. Of course, go take a look at this game, by the way. You can see it in the free sample of this book. And just really see what's going on here, because it looks like there are many ways to capture, but there aren't. Here we've got a double check from the bishop on c2, rook on f6, forcing this king to come down. Check, and now check. Black doesn't have a lot of options, and then g3. Final move, g3, because rook is coming to h4 next. Let's use a highlighter. Black's king is completely paralyzed. All of Black's pieces are pretty much completely paralyzed, and it's going to be checkmate in the end. Now, this was a simple game, which is crazy, and it looks like it was a lot of fun to play. Probably not so much for Black, but for Alekhine it was. Let's talk about our final world champion, well, our fifth world champion, final one for this video, which is Max Euwe. When Max Euwe became world champion, it was a little bit of a shock to the chess world, because he was considered to be a bit of an amateur, in the sense that he was not at the level of what the previous world champions were, but he was able to dethrone Alekhine as world champion. And his success can largely be attributed to his research skills, because Euwe had a doctorate in mathematics. He was a math teacher. He just had that math brain, which in chess can be a very good combination. He used this to prepare opening blows to Alekhine, which led him to gain the title. Of course, he didn't hold on to the title for very long. He lost it just a couple of years later, in 1937, to Alekhine again. But by no means Euwe was just a small part of the chess world. He had a huge role in chess. Probably, still today is considered to be not just a great player, but a great chess icon. He cemented his role in chess as the FIDE president from 1970 to 1978, and he wrote a bunch of chess books. Let's take a look at one of Euwe's games against Alekhine, so we can see exactly how this happened, how Euwe was able to dethrone one of the greatest players in the game. Here we have game 26 from their World Championship match, and Alekhine had been playing, Slav and Grunfeld in response to d4. But at this stage of the match, Alekhine decided to kind of go all out according to his style, which seemed to not work so well against the well-prepared Euwe. So let's take a look. d4, e6, c4, f5. Now, this is called the Dutch defense. Usually it can also start with d4, f5 straight away. Black starts some kind of kingside attack, giving up the center but taking it from the side. g3, check. You'll see Alekhine trying to be quite aggressive in this game. Knight c3, knight f3, knight e4, not even developing, just going straight for the kill. b6, queen c2, putting pressure on this knight, and white is just strategically played, developed all the pieces, and gets an advantage because of that. Knight takes c3, bishop takes c3, bishop takes, king takes, queen c8. Now black is obviously trying to bring the queen over to this long white diagonal because this white king is a little weak. But white has time on his side and he goes for d5. d6, knight d3, coming back. Black blocks the center, which is fine, except the fact that white's knight is a lot stronger than black's knight right now. And we're going to see how that plays out. King h1, just getting the king out of the action. Of course, there were other moves in this position, but this is what white's idea was. c6, trying to make some trades. Queen b3, getting on that light square diagonal, which has been a pattern in the games we've looked at, taking advantage of this diagonal. Quite interesting. King h8, stepping off of it, and then f4 comes, opening up the position. e4, of course, black had the option to take, which probably wouldn't be as great because that would enable white to capture with the knight, and then suddenly e6 becomes a little bit of a problem. Also, the bishop has opened up, which it's been opened with e4 anyway. Let's go back to the game. e4, attacking the knight, but as I said, the dark squared bishop is now nice and open. Knight b4, c5. The knight is just able to remaneuver to a better square. And that's exactly what happens. Capturing on f5, capturing on c6, knight takes d6. A lot of attacks happening right now. Of course, white's just kind of sacrificed a piece. This idea of capturing on f5, allowing bishop to take on c3. This was most likely all calculated. Of course, if white captures the bishop on c3, then black will capture the knight on f5. So white does a little desperado and first captures on e6, attacking the queen. And now, of course, black has to do something about that. Black plays queen b8. Again, it's a bit of a pickle because white is going to lose a piece. But in this instance, white has a pass pawn, and white's going to get another one, and the pawns are just going to be way too strong. Knight takes e4. So although white is a piece down, white has two pass pawns. Boom and boom. And this is going to be the reason that Euwe wins this game. Knight d2, g5, trying to get some kind of attack on the king, trying to dismantle this really nice pawn chain, but e4 is coming. G takes, three pass pawns now, by the way. This bishop comes and sits on a nice square, but it's not doing much. e5, the pawns are just storming. I really like this game. e6, we keep going. Rook g8, giving up the knight, but before doing anything, white first goes to knight f3. There's no rush to capture this knight. White pretty much prefers having these pawns. Let's take a look at what happens. Queen g6, black starting something or trying to start something. Now, really nice move, rook g1. Rook g1 to control the g file, giving up the rook for the bishop, but probably this is black's strongest piece, first of all. And at the same time, now white is able to defend the g file and have some kind of control over it. Queen f6, knight g5, rook g7, planning to double up, but this allows white to capture, and all the pieces start coming in. These pawns were just way too strong. Of course, trading queens is a good idea here. This queen is pinned, and by capturing, this allows white to have connected pass pawns. Rook f5, but rook e1, defending the pawn, of course. Now, funny move, h6, which is considered to be a blunder and leads to black being dead lost. We've got knight d8. Rook comes to f2, but black just simply does not have enough time to do anything. Knight c6, rook e8, push, and the game is pretty much done. You can take a look at the full game in the book from Craig Pritchard's and see how this all plays out. Knight e4 resigns. Really awesome game. I think it showcases Euwe's style being quite, proper, and Alekhine wanting to go all out and create some kind of attack, which just simply did not work. As promised, let's take a look at this puzzle and see if we got the 4-move checkmate. White starts with rook h8 check, king e7, and this is the wow move, and that is rook e8. Black can't capture with the king, and black is removing the defender, which is the rook of the d7 square. And that's what happens. Rook takes e8, rook takes d7, king f8, and rook takes f7, checkmate. Hope you got it. And that's us for today. You can read everything we've just spoken about on the blog, which I have linked down below in the description box. You can also take a look at the book in the description box. Again, it's an amazing book. So much to learn about chess, not just the world champions, but every great player who came before. The cover is actually of Carlsen playing against Steinitz, which is a cool thought to have, looking at the old and the new put together. And let us know in the comments what you think. We are going to have part 2 coming out soon.